A man kneels beside a lake at 11,000 feet. No trail leads here, no road. Just granite and wind and a sheet of water so still it looks like glass laid over the mountain. He's counting fish, trout, dozens of them, gliding beneath the surface of a lake that, by every reasonable account, should be empty. This basin formed after the last ice age. No river feeds it. No stream connects it to anything below. It sits alone, a stone bowl catching snowmelt thousands of feet above the nearest river that holds fish. And yet here they are. What if the fish didn't swim here at all? What if something carried them alive through the sky? What if the answer has been raining down for millions of years and almost no one has looked up to notice? This is the mystery of the sky-borne fish. And once you see the evidence, you'll never look at a mountain storm the same way again. For centuries, people who lived near these high lakes had a story for this. Fishermen in the Alps, farmers in the Andes, villagers in Wales and Scotland. Different languages, different continents. The same claim, repeated for generations. Sometimes, after a violent storm, fish fall from the sky. Modern science laughed this off as folklore, a fisherman's tale dressed up to explain something simpler, like eggs stuck to a bird's foot. But in 1859, in the town of Aberdare, Wales, something happened that made scientists stop laughing. After a sudden squall, the streets and rooftops were covered in small silver fish. Not a few, hundreds. Witnesses described them landing on hats, on shop awnings. One man reportedly caught one in his coat pocket as it fell. The Zoologist Journal recorded the event. Naturalists were sent to investigate. The fish were alive. Here's where it gets strange. Scientists tried to dismiss it as a hoax, or a strange coincidence involving a burst fish tank or a delivery cart. But eyewitnesses from separate parts of town, people who didn't know each other, described the same thing. Fish falling only where the storm passed directly overhead. Streets 10 minutes away, completely dry, had nothing. That detail matters. A prank doesn't follow a storm's exact path. A hoax doesn't land only under the clouds and nowhere else. Something else was happening. To understand it, we need to go back further, to a phenomenon meteorologists had already documented but rarely connected to something as strange as raining fish. Waterspouts. A waterspout is a tornado's quieter cousin, a spinning column of air that forms over water and can reach wind speeds over 100 miles per hour. Unlike a tornado's brute force destruction, a waterspout often behaves more like a vacuum, drawing water and anything suspended in it upward into the base of a storm cloud. In 1896, researchers in France documented a waterspout crossing a shallow coastal pond. Within minutes, the pond's surface churned violently, and observers on a nearby hillside reported watching debris and something moving rise into the funnel. The storm moved inland. 20 minutes later, in a village 3 miles away, it began to rain small fish. 20 minutes. Fish don't just fall from clouds, they get pulled from one body of water, carried inside a moving storm system, and released somewhere else entirely. But this is where the story should have ended, and it didn't, because waterspouts explain fish falling into towns near lakes. They do not explain how fish end up in a stone basin at 11,000 feet, sealed off by cliffs, with no waterspout in recorded history ever reaching that altitude. So scientists asked a harder question. What if the storm isn't the whole answer? What if it's only half of one? In the 1950s and 60s, wildlife biologists studying alpine lakes in the western United States started noticing a pattern that had nothing to do with weather. Lakes that had never been stocked by humans, lakes too high and too isolated for any known natural fish migration, were still occasionally developing small trout populations. The leading theory for decades had been eggs. Fish eggs, sticky and resilient, hitching a ride on the muddy feet of ducks and herons as they moved from lake to lake. It sounded reasonable. It was also mostly wrong. In 2020, a team of researchers led by scientists at Aalborg University and the University of Copenhagen published something remarkable. They took mallard ducks and fed them common carp eggs, then examined what came out the other end. Some of the eggs survived digestion. Not many, a small fraction, but enough. Under laboratory conditions, viable carp eggs passed completely through a duck's digestive system and hatched afterward. The paper appeared in the Proceedings of the Royal Society B. It was the first hard evidence that fish could travel not attached to a bird, but inside one. A living lake carried in the gut of something flying. But here's the twist that made the researchers pause. Ducks don't fly to remote alpine lakes at 11,000 feet very often. Their range, their preferred habitat, their migration patterns, none of it lines up perfectly with the loneliest, highest lakes where fish still mysteriously appear. So if it isn't only storms and it isn't only ducks, what else is moving fish through the sky? Now, something even stranger enters the picture. In 2013 in Karratha, Western Australia, dozens of small fish and crustaceans fell from a clear sky. No storm, no clouds. Locals filmed it on their phones, footage now archived by Australian meteorological services. Investigators proposed a different mechanism entirely. Not a waterspout dumping its cargo immediately, but wind shear, powerful upper-level currents that can carry lightweight organisms for miles before a shift in air pressure lets them fall. Miles, not meters, miles. Which means the fish that landed in Karratha may have been picked up from water that no one on the ground ever saw. If wind can carry a fish sideways for that distance, altitude stops being the obstacle it once seemed. A storm system doesn't need to touch a mountain lake directly. It only needs to release its cargo somewhere upstream in the air, at a height and a wind current that eventually drifts and falls exactly where gravity and geography decide. The lake isn't waiting for a delivery. The sky is running a lottery, and every so often, against enormous odds, the ticket lands in the right basin, at the right elevation, with the right temperature, and something that shouldn't survive does. This is where everything changes, because once you understand that fish eggs can survive digestion, that storms can carry living cargo for miles, that wind alone can suspend a creature far longer than seems physically reasonable, the mountain lake stops looking like an anomaly. It starts looking like the end result of an ancient, invisible transport system that has been quietly seeding remote water for millions of years, long before humans existed to notice or explain it. Every isolated lake on every isolated mountain in the Andes, the Himalayas, the Rockies, may be less isolated than it appears. Not connected by rivers, connected by sky, which raises something harder to sit with. We tend to think of life as something that spreads by walking, swimming, crawling, slowly and deliberately across connected ground. But some of the most remote pockets of life on Earth may exist because something far more chaotic reached them first. A storm that happened to pass over the right pond, a duck that happened to eat the right meal, a wind current that happened to hold on for 1 mile too many. Not design, not intention, just an almost unbelievable accumulation of accidents, repeated across geological time. Until eventually, one of them worked. The man kneeling at the edge of that lake at 11,000 feet isn't just looking at fish. He's looking at the visible proof of an invisible history, thousands of failed storms, thousands of digested eggs that never made it, thousands of years where nothing happened at all. And then, once, something did. The next time a storm rolls over a lake near you and the sky darkens and the wind picks something up you'll never see fall back down, ask yourself where it's going, because somewhere right now it might already be landing.